And so for today, so this is class 2. So welcome to class 2, everyone. We're very excited for this class because we get to center and talk about Palestinian culture and the ways that Palestinian culture has become a part of the occupation and Israeli oppression in many ways, and what we can do to preserve and hold on to culture, as the name of this class implies. So that's the agenda for today. We'll start off with just a couple of you sharing the homework. We will have an opening discussion question. Then we're going to get deep into cultural appropriation. If you haven't heard that word before, that's totally fine. We're going to talk about it today. And then we will talk about some fun aspects of Palestinian culture, but through the context of the occupation and how even culture and traditions are affected by that. Told me someone put something in the chat. So if at any point I want to be conscious of time and end at 7, but last time we did this with a different group, over time we had a lot of conversation. So I'm going to be conscious of time as we go through this, try to get through the material, but I don't want that to stop you guys from participating. So please just put stuff in the chat, react, raise your hand if you want to speak, and just let me know. Okay, so the homework from last week was to ask your parents. I did not put the questions there. Ask your parents a set of questions. Does anyone want to present what they talked to their parents about? And I can pull up the questions again if we need to. So we need like 1 or 2 people, maybe 2 or 3 people to present. And everyone else can put stuff in the chat. Jamal, go ahead. Sorry, Jamal, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't hear you. Was everyone else?
Yeah, I can't hear you either.
Can you guys hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. So for the first question where it says like where from Palestine are your parents from? So my mom's from Essaouira. It's on like the outskirts of Jerusalem and all that sort of stuff. And then for where she was born, so she was born in Kuwait, and then she ended up she moved to Palestine for a little bit, and she ended up living in Saudi Arabia for a few years and then coming here to the States. And then how did she end up here? Is that her maternal grandfather immigrated here to the US in the 60s, and then he bought like a plot of land, and then they built houses, and then she came a little bit later for college. And then 2 to 3 of her favorite Palestinian traditions were Debka, Thob, and Ya Halali Ya Mali. I don't know what that is, but and then and then her favorite food was Mekluba and Mensef. And then she said that she wanted me to learn mostly about like history, culture and tradition of Palestine. So
awesome. Nice. We're going to talk about all of that today and then throughout the rest of the course. Thanks for sharing, Jamal, starting us off. Anyone else want to share? I just unmuted myself. 2 more people, at least 1 more person.
Sure, I could share. So our history is a little bit complicated. So I talked to my mother. My mother herself is not from Palestine, but we have roots in the Holy Land generations and generations ago. That's what kind of got me interested a little, like more and more. So generations ago, she was born here though, and they ended up in the United States because her father is actually from Peru, and her mother, who has Palestinian roots, actually lived in the Caribbean before this, and we love to talk about how we ended up there, and so we have interesting conversations about that. And I guess like my mom's like said like that she likes the values that Palestine has about family and faith and really being bonded together by that.
Thanks for sharing that. There's a lot of like migration history with Palestinians too, because of the nature of them being like displaced people, and so we'll get into some of those conversations, and hopefully you'll get a lot of the Palestinian heritage in this class. We're going to try to put as much as we can in this class, but we'll get more throughout the course if needed. So I saw Salih, I saw that you sent me them in the chat. Is it okay if I read them out loud, or did you want that just to be shared with me?
It's your choice. I don't really mind.
Sorry, I didn't hear you. I want to make sure it's okay.
It's fine. It's fine.
Cool, thanks. So Salih is from a town called Jeet. He was born in Saudi Arabia, or was it your parents? Born in Saudi Arabia, came to work in America.
It's my dad.
Your dad, okay. Traditions his dad likes include respecting parents and elders. We're going to talk about that today, actually. Giving olive trees their own names. I love that. Olive trees are part of like people's families. And so we're also going to talk about that. Favorite food is msakhan and mansaf, like two of the most traditional Palestinian foods, and learning more about the history of the struggle and how to get involved. So history we will start with next week. This week is going to be about, again, culture and what we can do to preserve culture. So thank you all for sharing. If the rest of you want to put your answers and share some of your family history in the chat, please feel free to do so everyone else can follow along. Give me 1 second to get back to my screen. And Malik, I saw that you put the answers on Google Classroom, so thank you for doing that. Okay. So right now, I want everyone to take a couple of minutes, and as you are answering this, just put the answers in the chat. So everyone needs to give me at least 1 or 2 words. What are the first things or first words that you think of when you think of Palestine? I'm gonna give us exactly a minute, and then I'm gonna show a video, and you guys can still keep putting in the chat as we're watching the video. And there's no right or wrong answer for this. So literally just the first thing that pops in your head. Faith, holy, food, home, oppression, and strength. Nice. I'm gonna wait for others.
Slam Abir. I just have to I'm at like West Milford right now and I have a basketball game at 7, so I'm gonna have to leave at like 6:30.
Fine. Thanks for letting me know. Towards the end of the class, we'll be watching videos. So all the videos will be on Google Classroom if you want to watch them after. My family and the land itself, resistance, oppression, home, people, Islam, family, food, beautiful. Thank you guys for the answers. And what I like about your answers, apartheid, family, and culture. So what we want to do, especially with this class, is oftentimes when we think of Palestinians or Palestine, or when the news talks about Palestinians, it's never usually in a good light. It's never about the culture. It's never about the people. It's never about the beauty that we know is Palestine. Obviously, the struggle and what you all said, resistance and apartheid and oppression are a part of Palestinian reality and identity, but we don't want that to be the only thing that we associate with Palestine, because Palestine has a lot more. And actually part of the goal of occupation is to remove everything that is Palestinian and make Palestinians into, you know, violent, backwards people like they're portrayed in the news that have no culture, no heritage, because it's easier to justify what's happening to them if you take away who they are and their identity. If you dehumanize someone, you're not going to care as much about what's happening to them. So what I appreciate about all of you put in the chat is that you included the good parts of being Palestinian and the strength and the resilience and the food and the culture, and even in your answers and what your parents answered. So I really want you all to start thinking when you're educating others about Palestine or talking about Palestine, is to also not only talk about in the context of oppression and occupation, but also bring in the culture and keep the culture and the heritage alive. And so we're gonna watch a video. As we're watching the video, I want you to think of where or from whom did you first, not first, but where from whom do you learn about Palestine, or did you first learn about Palestine? Whether it was the culture or the struggle, just keep that in mind as we're watching the video. And hopefully that helps make why this video is important, it makes sense.
Now, you may have thought the art of oral storytelling was dead. Well, not in Palestine. One man is determined to bring back the tradition and is encouraging young people to get involved.
Hamza Akrabawi knows how to entertain. He's a Palestinian storyteller and he's collected hundreds of anecdotes, jokes, tales, and proverbs from around the country. Now he tells his stories at festivals and tours like this one.
Hamza's stories and information in general add an influenced aim of these tours, which is to strengthen the relationship between the Palestinians and their land, the Palestinian adherence to their heritage, the Palestinian adherence to the traditional stories. We want participants to recognize the value of the history of their land.
Telling ancient tales runs in the family. Akrabawi's grandfather was a storyteller too. In 2006, the grandson decided to write a book about the history of his West Bank village called Akraba. He began by collecting stories from older people in his hometown.
Traditional stories are people's heritage. If we only document and archive them, then it's killing this heritage. So we are storytellers. Our mission is to revive this art and heritage and bring it to the people. When we started, the involvement and participation was very weak. Today, in each tour that I participate in, the traditional story is a basic part of the tour, and also all the cultural events and festivals in Ramallah and the West Bank. The key demand is the presence of the storyteller.
5 years ago, a Palestinian youth group asked Akrabawi to be part of Tejwal. It's an institute that organizes tours for young people interested in finding out more about Palestinian heritage. He's been telling his tales to young people ever since.
He's telling us stories that I was never aware of. Even if I go to read about Palestinian heritage on Wikipedia, I will never find it. What you find there are things like conflicts, wars, clashes, and historical events. But you never find how our people were living, how my grandparents were living, how they've dealt with each other. You don't find the stories about social life that Hamza is telling us.
Akrabawi, together with other storytellers, has helped to revive the Palestinian storytelling tradition, both as an art form and as a way of bringing the past to life.
Any interesting things from this video or initial thoughts? And maybe thinking of it in the context of that question I asked you, where do you get your knowledge about Palestine? Where do you learn about Palestine? Oh, hi, Danya. Danya's on.
Sorry, I'm driving, but hi everyone. It's nice to see everyone.
Any thoughts about that video?
I guess at least for me, like the stories I hear about Palestine and stuff are all from my grandfather. Because he spends like half of because he has property in Palestine, so he'll spend a lot of time over there. Now and even in the past. So tell me a lot of stories of his family and kind of how it was back then and how it is now. So I get to kind of see kind of both sides of that, which is really cool.
Yeah. So, and that was part of what some of your parents answered, right? Is like the listening to elders, the importance of elders and parents and family in Palestinian culture. A lot of it is because of storytelling and heritage, and important aspects of each family dynamic are passed down through storytelling, through oral history. And so we also want to make sure, because of the reality of the Palestinian struggle and Palestine being under occupation, not just physically, but like we said earlier, the actual identity and the culture. This information is not always going to be documented. This isn't going to be in textbooks. You're not going to always find this cited, academically. You're not going to learn about it in your public education in this country, at least, because there's a deliberate erasure of Palestinian culture so that we can justify Israeli occupation. And so that makes the importance of us listening to our family stories, making sure we ask it from our elders while they're still around and with us, trying to document it, write it down, and then sharing it with future generations, your siblings, children, if you have any, whatever it may be, because that right now is one of the biggest parts and ways that we can keep Palestinian culture tradition alive and hold on to it. So we wanted to start with that and kind of put that out there and make that a grounding thing for us. Because a lot of times people say, well, like we don't need to worry about Palestinian culture right now, we just have to free it. But what we say a lot, Pac, is if we free it, exactly, and you're shaking your head, if we free it, and then what is Palestine? You know, if we have no cultural preservation, then we're not grounded in the people, and that's always really important.
Can I just add to that? I always see when people say like Israeli food, and it's like falafel and like hummus and things like that, and I'm like, what? I'm like, yeah. So I totally agree. Like when I talk about, you know, Palestine, I always usually go from like the core values, you know, of the people and like the social norms and like the beauty of the culture. And then the occupation is last on our list because we have to keep the culture alive. If the culture dies off and we save Palestine, then there is not going to be a Palestine.
Yeah, exactly. And you're actually transitioning us perfectly into our next conversation about cultural appropriation. But what I want to also add is the reason that Palestine still exists and Palestinians are so strong is because of their strong hold on their identity and culture and their pride in being Palestinian. And so that in itself becomes a political act too, to hold on to all the cultural aspects. So let's get into cultural appropriation.
Now,
does anyone know, has anyone heard of cultural appropriation? If you all can just raise your hand using the feature. If you have, put it in the chat. Has anyone heard of the term before? I see a couple of people. Okay, does anyone want to explain it to us? Sada, I saw your hand up. Can I pick on you? Just to briefly explain it in your own words.
Okay. I guess it's like I don't know how to exactly like explain it because it's like a lot of like thing, but it's like in the simplest terms, stealing someone else's culture, like taking something that isn't from your culture and using it as if it is.
Yeah, that's basically exactly it. Is when you take someone else's.
No, I don't know what it is.
Thank you. So when you take aspects of someone else's culture or parts of someone else's culture and then claim it as your own, and then most importantly, other than just claiming it, is you're also getting to profit off of it. So there's a second component where, especially with communities of color, they have gotten either oppressed or their culture has been erased, or they're, you know, in school you're made fun of for certain things, but then all of a sudden when someone else gets into it, usually when white people want to embody it or adopt it, then it becomes cool. So I'm thinking of like certain foods that, you know, if you took to school lunch with you and people would be like, ew, what's that smell? But then like if it becomes in a cool restaurant, it's popular, then it's cool. Or thinking about yoga. Yoga was not something that has always been mainstream, and South Asian people have been made fun of it, and you know, you can't make money off of like yoga studios. But then when white people in the US discovered it and started realizing the spiritual benefits of it, they can, you know, open up studios and they can profit off of it. So there's a lot of profiting off of the culture that you steal that is important to understanding appropriation. So can anyone think of ways, and we're giving you a hint, if anyone followed or heard about what happened with Miss Universe, or other ways, so Nina already shared some with food, that Palestinian culture has been appropriated. So for example, you'll see people claim falafel to be Israeli or couscous to be Israeli. I think even, actually, I don't know. I feel like I heard someone say they're trying to take matluba too, but I don't know if that was real. So can anyone think of any other things that are Palestinian that have been appropriated?
I think this is a little bit more broader, but I think I could argue this is actually the Christian faith. People in the West love to twist the narrative of Yeshua and, you know, make it into that he's Israeli for some reason. I don't know.
No, that's right. Like, who acknowledges that there's Christian history, a very important Christian history in Palestine, and that if we want to talk about where Jesus comes from, then you have to argue that Jesus is Palestinian, right? That's a very important, and there's a deliberate reason, right, is to make it seem like it's just the Muslim versus Jewish issue, when that's completely wrong, and we will get to that in another class. So let's watch this video just in case, just to help get us thinking of appropriation, and then I want you all to share how you feel after watching this video. Did anyone follow this as it was happening? This was recent. This was in the last year. If you can just raise your hand in the chat if you followed it or just saw it. Okay, so it's new. Okay. Okay. So initial thoughts, reactions, and feelings to this. We can start with just feelings. Yeah, disgusting. So and well, I want others to share also their feelings, then we can talk about why it is problematic. Does this surprise us? Make us.
To be honest, it's very surprising. I've never heard about it or even seen it on social media to begin with, so it's my first time seeing it. It's very shocking, to be honest.
Yeah, and why is it shocking? Is it because it came from Miss Universe, or is it just like?
I mean, the fact that I've never seen it, even like we see like any like you see any like I guess like anything that pops on the news, we see it on social media majority of the time, like basketball clips, soccer clips, and whatnot. But however, this like a very crazy post and stealing or cultural theft, we don't see it anywhere for some reason.
Yeah, no, and I think where you're getting at is a really good point, is that when there are other, at least lately in the last couple of years, when there are other very harmful actions, like social justice wise, for example, against other marginalized communities, and not to pit anyone against each other, but to just explain how Palestine is still an exception and still doesn't get the recognition it needs, is that you'll probably see it. It'll go viral. You'll see it on your social media. And then when this happens, because it's against Palestinians and because it is about Palestinian cultural appropriation, it got swept under. None of them felt the need to apologize. None of them felt the need to take accountability, even though people were explaining in the comments that they did something wrong. So thank you, Becca, for sharing that. Maybe let's start unpacking what it is that they did wrong. So why is it that them wearing the thobe was wrong in that moment? Nino?
I just think that like them taking the Palestinian embroidery patterns and then marking it as Israeli is so, like, it's so out of this world. Like, it's so dangerous, and it blows my mind that they would even think to do that when it's clearly not Israeli.
Yeah, because Tatriz has such significant political and cultural significance for Palestinians, right? And so to just put something on and be taking pictures, like there's two parts of it, right? One is you're just putting it on and you're not doing the research or doing the work to understand the symbolism. And two, you're calling it the wrong culture, right? You're going somewhere and you're not doing any research to know the context, the political context, the social context, which, and you all can let me know what you think, but I think for me in this day and age, like there's no excuse for that anymore. You have Google, you have books, and even if you really didn't know, people put it in the comments and they still didn't feel the need to take accountability, do anything. And I think that's if I'm right, Becky, if I can, that's kind of what the shock and the frustration is like. Would this be allowed or okay if it was anyone else also? Jamal, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I was just also gonna say that like people like this like Miss Universe contestant or whoever she was. I think it's also kind of ridiculous because like being a person who has like this influence on social media, they should be held to a high level of scrutiny. And I don't think it's like for example, like I could be as frustrated as I am when I'll overhear like someone say like, no, it's not Palestine, it's Israel or whatever, like in the class or something. But they're also 14 or 15 or 16 or whatever. So I can also kind of understand, all right, well, they're not like adults, they might not do the research, this is just what they hear from their parents or whatever. So I can kind of excuse that. And also try to inform them, but nonetheless. But then these people, like you said, they have all these things, immediately available to them, all these resources. So then to kind of still, show all this stuff and kind of be like outspoken about it is kind of ridiculous. And I don't think it's, with that much influence, you really can't be doing that, because then it just really leads into more of this like misinformation and kind of like cyclical habit of just, hearing the wrong thing. And then this like, to just confirming the same bias that isn't healthy to like the truth or finding accurate information.
Yeah, exactly. Someone at their platform, like said in the chat, and at their level, you have a platform where you influence people, and you should be, and we expect people to be extra mindful and at least conscious of what they're doing before. Danya?
I love the conversation that's happening. I just wanted to also just jump in to talk about specifically that in a way that this is the idea of it is a tactic and a manipulation tactic of the Israeli existence, I guess, is that because they are trying to show the world that they do have a culture, right? And that's why specifically cultural appropriation is very dangerous and not called out, because if they were to call out cultural appropriation, then the question comes from, okay, where does this culture where do these things originally come from? What culture is it from? And then it comes into the question of all of Israel and its facets, right? Because Israel only existed formally from 1948. So there really is no culture. So everything that they're taking, right, is from another culture. And the way that the Israeli tactics are that they do it on such, like you said, on large platforms, whether that be like Miss Universe or Miss whatever this contest was, or whether it be in pop culture. Like I was telling Abida this other day that I watched this show that I really, really like. It's called Call the Midwife, which has a huge following. But they had to include, which, like on your point, they were talking about Christmas and Jesus, and they were saying, oh, but Jesus is Israeli. And I like almost turned off the TV because I'm like, since when? Like, why is this narrative being now changed and switched into something else? And it's the same idea that you're getting this message out to the general public in the easiest way possible, which is through pop culture, which is through these very public officials, that it becomes something so regular, right? So that when you hear it, you're like, oh, I heard that on some random show. Like, oh, it must be true, And usually the public masses, I guess, usually don't question what they generally hear. So I think it's also important to just note that this is a way, like culture appropriation and the way that they're highlighting it and showing it is being done very, very intentionally.
Yeah, thank you, Danya. That's really important. Like, this is not happening for no reason or by chance. This is very deliberate. And it's Rania, what I was telling you yesterday, I was on campus yesterday and we passed by a Hillel house, which we can talk more about later, but most campuses have a Hillel house, which is they're very politically Zionist, more pro-Israel, but it is also just for Jewish students in general, but most of them embody, most of the staff also there embody the politics. And on the outside of the house were two banners, one that said, come inside for a free 10-day trip to Israel. And then the other banner said, the name, they have a cafe and the name of their cafe is Jerusalem Cafe. And so I sent a voice note to Rania right away how frustrating it was. And Rania mentioned, like, that's that's part of the deliberate, is like, when you think of Jerusalem, you're just going to associate it with Israel. You're not associating it with Palestine, right? And so there's all these subtle ways of taking over the culture and appropriating the culture. And that's why part of our resistance has to be holding on to this culture and continuing to be proud of this culture. So I want to show one more direct example of appropriation, and then we'll go into culture in general. What Does anyone know what the Dahiyya is? Palestinian Dahiyya? If you've been to a wedding, it's like a song. Does anyone, you can just raise your hand. Claudia knows. Becca knows. Okay. We'll listen to it. I just want to see, do you all know who Muhammad Asaf is? Very famous Palestinian singer, won Arab Idol. So I want you to hear, he sings it. For those who haven't heard it, just we'll listen to it for a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. I just wanted you to hear it. So this is a very, very traditional, very uniquely Palestinian, like not even Arab, Palestinian, well, maybe other Arab, I don't know, not Lebanese for sure. So very Palestinian song. There's a dance to the song, and Rania, please, or Slado, please correct me, or Beckett, or whoever, if I'm not explaining it correctly, because I'm not Palestinian. There's a dance to it. It's done at celebrations, weddings, like it's just a staple Palestinian thing. So now I want you all to watch this video. This video was taken by Rania, I think. So a couple of PAC staff got to go to Palestine. We have a Homeland Project trip. That is our way to kind of undo the free trips to Israel. As we try to give people trips to Palestine. So if you're interested in that, I don't know if, or anyone, you know, ask Rania or myself, but they were in Palestine this summer. And they stumbled upon this. And this right here is a group of Israeli settlers. So I want you to hear what they are doing.
I'm really good. They have this here now?
Okay, so the person coming up to them was not a settler, who said their tour guide, but you could, did you all hear the similarity? So there's basically an Israeli Dahiyya now, and they're singing in Hebrew, and it's the same beat, it's probably the same dance, using it for a celebration. So any thoughts on that or questions? It's very frustrating. You can imagine how they felt stumbling upon it. They dance the same too, like try to do just the original. Yeah. So even things like dance and culture, music, all parts of that are being affected and stolen and taken by the occupation. And so this is what we mean by cultural appropriation. I want to start transitioning us into just learning about Palestinian culture in general, but we really want to start with that and think of all the other cultural stuff we're learning within this context of what is our role to play? What do we need to do to preserve this as specifically Palestinian? And I also want to use this for us to be mindful of when we're engaging with other cultures and other cultural practices, to be conscious in the same way we want people to be conscious when they're engaging in Palestinian cultural practices. So we know what it feels like for our culture to be appropriated. We know the frustration, and we want to make sure that we never do that to someone else's culture. And I'm not saying that there are no ways to engage with other people's cultures. It's a beautiful thing to do that. You just have to do it in a way where you're not stealing it, you're not claiming it as your own, you're not making profit off of it. And the people of that culture are inviting you in and teaching you about it, and you're doing it in a healthy way. And if you guys have questions about that, we can also keep talking about that. Or actually, any questions about appropriation specifically before we move on? Okay, so I'm gonna move us into just key parts of Palestinian culture. A lot of them have videos, so for the sake of time and just to make sure we have a good discussion, we'll watch the videos first, and then we'll have about 2 or 3 comments from each of you about the videos, and then we'll move forward. So first thing we want to talk about is olives. I'm sure most of you know the importance of olives in Palestinian food and culture. Olive trees are best grown in Palestine. There's seasonal culture behind, there's seasonal traditions behind the olive harvest. One of you already shared that, and we talked about how olive trees are passed down through families. So it's family connections, generational connection, and this video really helps showcase that.
She doesn't move, man. In Palestine, there are around 10 million olive trees that cover 50% of its land. They are hundreds of years old. The olive tree is a symbol for Palestinian. It's a part of Palestinian culture, food, and heritage.
شجرة الزيتون هي تاريخنا، حضرنا ومستقبلنا وتاريخنا اللي تربوا عليه جدودنا في بلادنا في فلسطين المحتلة. شجرة الزيتون رمز للشعب الفلسطيني، الاحتلال الإسرائيلي بحاول يستهدف هذه الشجرة دونا عن كل الأشجار اللي موجودة في فلسطين، بحاول يستهدفها، يجرفها، يحرقها، بحاول يقضي على هوية الشعب الفلسطيني. على التلفزيون بنشوف على القنوات الفضائية الاحتلال بتعمدوا انه يجرف الزيتون ويحرق الزيتون، طبعا ما بحبوا شجره واحده تضل في الضفه الغربيه.
It's a lot of work here, so I'm gonna help farmers out by using this ladder, which is usually used to reach high branches. Farmers work long hours every day to harvest olives. In the meantime, I'm smelling amazing things. Let's see where it's coming from. So fried sliced tomatoes and eggplants are a favorite among farmers. And of course, we have here hummus, we have here fool, and we will not forget this olive, okay? We have black olive and the green olive. It's look yellow, but it's green, okay? So, and the taste of this olive is really, really good, man. Really good. And of course, they would not miss tea made on firewood, really. After the farmers have done the hard work, they take the olive to a mill to start the process of pressing it into olive oil. There are many steps to olive pressing. Let's check out how this process works.
يتم استقبال ثمار الزيتون وفرزها من الأوراق ومن الشوائب ومن الحجارة ومن أي شيء ممكن يكون موجود أثناء عملية حصاده. بعد هيك بتم كبسه في داخل المكابس لمدة نص ساعة، بتم فرز الماء عن الزيت والجفت بخرج من مكان ثاني. طبعا ال 100 كيلو تقريبا بيعطي حوالي 16 لتر زيت، وفي نوعية من التمار 80 كيلو منها بيعطي 16 لتر زيت، وفي نوعية من التمار المخلطة ما بين سري وكي 18 ونبالي ممكن يعطي 90 كيلو 16 لتر زيت.
Since I am here in the mill and I am a big fan of olive oil, I cannot miss the chance to buy some for my family. So here we have Ramzi to give us advice on how to buy a good olive oil. رمزي لما بدنا نشتري زيت زيتون كويس كيف نفحص جودة الزيتون هذا؟
افضل زيتون موجود هنا عندنا هو الزيتون السري. هذا زيتون مقصر ببلاد الشام وفلسطين بالذات. طعمه مميز عن جميع انواع الزيتون عن اي زيت موجود في العالم. طعم ريحه قويه شاطه في الزور تاكل منه ما تزهقش منه نهائيا لانه مميز يعني مميز بمعنى الكلمه.
The olive trees hold special status for Palestinians and symbolize our connection to our land. It's a connection that passed down among generations for hundreds of years. And as the saying goes, no one makes olive oil better than a Palestinian. See you in the next time.
Okay. So any initial reactions to that video? And also, so he mentioned in the beginning, and we talk about olive trees have a very significant relationship to Palestinian land and families. And so part of Israeli occupation tactic is to cut down or burn olive trees, either to make way or space for settlements or just as well, actually, I'm going to ask you, why do you think they would do that? Why would they cut down or intentionally burn olive trees?
It destroys profits.
Yes. So as you can see, for many families, this is how they're economically stable. This is part of their finances, is harvesting the olives, making olive oil, selling it, etc. And so, yeah, if you take that away from them, then you're taking away financial stability and you're making their life harder. There's one more reason that I want to make sure we get at. So there's the monetary reason, there's the making way for settlements. Why else? What else would cutting down these trees do for people, for Palestinians specifically?
It also makes life miserable there. So it kind of takes away that, like we talked about, that human factor in the beginning. Kind of dehumanizes them and hurts their culture, basically.
Yeah, you're taking away something that is so important to them and their families and their elders and generations, something they were going to pass down. So there's like a psychological and mental aspect to it of like reminding them that the occupation exists and that the occupation can take anything away from you at any point, even something that you hold very valuable. Thanks, Amir. Anyone else? Tanya, did you want to add anything? If you can, while you're driving. It erases culture, so it's taking away an integral part of Palestinian life. Okay, if you all want to comment on this or talk about it after, please let me know. If you haven't had Palestinian olive oil or olives, please make sure you do, because there is a difference. So now we want to talk about Palestinian food a little bit. So in the chat, if you can just put some of your favorite Palestinian food, where do you have it, who makes it for you? So taking 30 seconds, and then we'll watch this video about someone who reclaims and makes it a point to reclaim Palestinian food. Matluba, Jamal's mom makes it. Mansaf, Amir's mom also makes it. All very Palestinian food. If y'all don't know what these foods are, we can also talk about it too. Hummus, pita, and olives. That's like oh, you make it, nice. I literally just learned how to make it. They're good for you. Still not as good as my mom's though. So the rest of you can put Palestinian food in the chat. I'm gonna play the video because I know a couple of you are leaving at 6:30, so I want to make sure you get as much as you can.
One of the reasons that Palestinians don't have this knowledge about the kitchens in different cities of Palestine is that Israel has disconnected different cities and regions and geographies in Palestine. So we don't have physical accessibility to those places, produce the food practices that differ one place to the other. My name is Mirna Bamia. I'm an artist, a cook, and founder of Palestine Hosting Society. Palestine Hosting Society is a live art project. It seeks to create a platform for people to construct a relationship to geography, politics, history, but through food. You have Israeli chefs dealing with our food culture without actually knowing the backstory of those dishes. When you oppress that story, you are using food as a tool for oppression. After picking the topic or the city that I want to delve more into, I go to the place and I spend a month or two in that place and I meet people. Pre-1948 Nakba generation, the ones that have experienced this very sudden rupture from the land and have moved all over the world. With them, food moved, but as well with them, food was forgotten. And I meet mothers as well to understand what dishes they still cook and they don't cook. But as well, I meet men, whether in small shops in old cities, old restaurants. Most of the people that I interviewed were exiled. One of the dishes that I was happy to put on the menu of the edible white plants table was loof. It's a very Palestinian plant, even the scientific name of it, Arum palestinum. It has Palestine in the name of it. So loof is a poisonous plant. When it's eaten as it is straight from the land, it numbs the mouth and it can even have more serious complications if it was consumed without being treated. Our grandmothers knew how to treat that plant by curing it with salt and olive oil and then cooked over a long period of time. The recipes have this power of movement that most of us Palestinians are not having. That I discovered during my research, Sist al-Kharroub. And Sist is a very, very old ancient dish. It's roasted semolina with olive oil, with carob molasses, and some people add tahini and sesame to it. It used to be the food that travelers and pilgrims carry with them when they travel because it has all this richness of nutrients and energy to it. Every table we create is very detailed, from the napkins that we have on the tables, from the centerpieces, from what we place the water in. When I present the menu, I do the performance. It's the artist who becomes the vehicle of transferring this knowledge on the table. They're not plated one by one because I want to maintain this sharing aspect of food, which is very much in our culture. For Palestinians as a farmer nation, we always had this very intimate connection with the land. Our grandfathers knew the land really well. It was their world. My generation are those that lost this knowledge. We're the generation that had to assimilate in their new places, whether refugee camps, whether outside Palestine, whether in new cities. The people who attend the tables of Palestine Hosting Society are from different backgrounds. And with each new table, we have new people who attend. When we as Palestinians see our ingredients being sold under the name of Israeli produce, it's a very hard moment for us. Somehow it refreshes the trauma of us losing the land, of us not having power over our existence. The land, not the space that you live on, but the place where you practice your being as a human being, as a Palestinian, as a culture, as a lineage of ancestors. And it's a story that we have to reclaim now in the present so we can pass it to the future.
Okay. Any thoughts about that video? Things that were new or interesting that popped out? And thanks for the rest of you for putting us in the chat. I saw Dawali, Ma'luba, Musakhan, and Nufiye. Very good Palestinian foods. So what do y'all think about it? Did you ever think about food and Palestinian food specifically, like in this context, as something political?
I never thought it'd be such like a symbolic meaning. Like obviously it meant something to me, but that was more of like a personal thing. So when they talk about it and they use it in politics, and kind of it makes you feel a certain way.
Yeah, it makes you rethink like every time you eat one of these foods, think deeper about it. And I think that's part of it, is showing how, because of the nature of what's happening in Palestine, everything that is Palestinian that Palestinians do has become political, and there's a way to turn that into something that you can do to help Palestine too. Someone made this, actually Aya made this comment, and we showed this in a different class, and she made a comment I really appreciated, is that it showed like the diversity of Palestinian food too. And so we don't just want to think about Palestinians as just like one thing, right? We're not all Palestinians are the same, and that's actually part of the process of making them all one and dehumanizing. So and what she talks about, and she put in a lot of research into this food to make sure she got food from Bayamid, thanks for being on. Good luck with your game. She did a lot of research to make sure that she was getting, Palestinian food or herbs or things that are important from different parts of Palestine. And each part of Palestine has something that's unique to it and specific to it. Just like the thobes and the tatris, which hopefully we have time to get to that video also. So other reactions or thoughts, it could just be comments, it could be that you liked it or you didn't hear of a certain food before. Musa?
The first thing that I really like, I feel like I never really knew how like important, like I knew that food was important in Palestinian culture, but I never knew how important it really was until the video. I never knew how important and how much it really meant to everybody and how much it meant to my Palestinian culture.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's part of why we wanted to show this, and that's part of why we put it in this, is to remind all of us that, because there are everyday things that sometimes we take for granted, but to remind all of us of everything is, especially when it comes to Palestine, is political and is important, and we can keep holding on to that significance. So hopefully you all think about that the next time you have some Palestinian food. If any of you are not from around Patterson or Clifton, please I'm sure you all know, but make sure you come to get really good Palestinian food. So we're going to transition into weddings. If you all can raise your hand or put in the chat if you've been to a Palestinian wedding, maybe certain parts of Palestinian wedding that are fun that you know of. I see a couple of hands. And actually, before, Danya, are you ready, or do you want me to go to a different slide first before this?
No, I'm ready.
Perfect. So this is where I hand it off to Danya because she has the most experience. And I think we actually have time for both, but we can make time for both. So Palestinian weddings are also very integral and very important to Palestinian culture. It's not just about people getting married, it's about families coming together, it's about celebrations, it's about the village that you come from and representing it. And so there's a lot of context with Palestinian weddings, and they're also very fun. And hopefully you get to go to one if you haven't been to one yet. And so there's some aspects of Palestinian weddings that we wanted to go over with you all. And so we're going to actually going to stop sharing my screen. Rania, I don't know if you want to introduce any of the videos first before I share.
Yeah. So like Abby said, Palestinian weddings are, I guess, extra special in the sense that there's a lot of different cultural traditions that are done throughout. One of them is what we're going to be talking about now, which I don't know what the proper, I guess, what they call it is, but it's different songs that are done by typically older women in the community or women in the community that are said in repetitive manners. So for example, like someone will say like Mbarak, Mbarak, and then other people will repeat Mbarak, Mbarak, and then they'll say Sab'a Barakat, and then they'll repeat Sab'a Barakat. So it's this idea of wishing, and it's usually the songs that are said have a lot of meaning to it, whether it be well wishes, whether it be conveying what's happening or conveying different emotions. And again, like I said, it's done in a very communal way. So you don't usually find one person singing this. You usually need at least two. And it's also very intergenerational, where usually the older women in the community are saying the first part, while the second woman, second part is being repeated by the younger people in the community. And there's different variations of it. So what we're gonna watch now is Subhi Taha does a really good job of uh memorizing and explaining and talking about a few of these different songs that we're talking about. So we'll watch this and then we'll discuss a little bit more because I see it's playing.
Yeah, I'm gonna read.
Yeah.
Reload it.
Did you know that in Palestine there are specific songs that are sung at weddings but also sung at funerals? This is part 2 in my series on Palestinian culture. This subgenre of songs are sung at weddings but also at the funerals specifically for martyrs. And this is in honor of the Palestinians who have been martyred in the past week. Allah yarhamhum. Example number 1 is a song sung for the mother of the groom. قولوا لأمه تفرح وتتهنى, which means tell his mother to be happy and to rejoice. Obviously because her son is getting married. But that exact same line is also sung to the mother of a martyr, telling her to be happy and to rejoice. Because in Islam, which is Palestine's majority religion, it's believed that if you die a martyr, you are guaranteed a place in heaven, which is obviously what every Muslim parent wants for their child. So it's devastating and painful that he's no longer there with her, but they're telling her to be happy because he's going to spend all of eternity in paradise and she doesn't have to worry whether he's going to make it to heaven or not. And so they'll sing to her, قولوا لأمه تفرح وتتهنى ترش الوسايد بما ورد وحنا. But a popular continuation of the lyrics for the mother of the martyr will go يم الشهيد الله يصبر قلبك ابنك بالجنة توكل يا ربك. Example number 2 is the song سب العيون وماد إيده يحنوله, which kind of means like she or he closed her eyes, put out her hand so that they could put henna on it. This is a song that can be sung to either the bride or the groom at their respective henna. So traditionally, the night before the wedding, both the bride and the groom have a henna party at their respective houses where their family puts henna on their hand, and it's essentially like the transition between singlehood and marriage. And so they'll sing to them سب العيون ومددوا يحنوا خسرورك وبالمنديل يلفوا. In this instance, they're saying they're closing their eyes in a sense that like they're kind of shy and they're like looking away while they're putting henna on their hand, and so they're kind of like closing their eyes. And then that their waist is being tied with a scarf or with a piece of fabric, and this is referring to the traditional Palestinian clothing for both the men and the women, where a fine and often luxurious fabric is wrapped around their waist as a belt as part of their wedding outfit. Which is why sometimes you'll hear, instead of the word mendil in the song, they'll say kashmir, which is a really fine silk fabric used for that belt. Now this song and these exact lyrics are also sung for the martyr. But rather than singing that he closed his eyes because he was shy, here they're saying he closed his eyes because he passed away. But how does the henna relate to a martyr? Henna in Palestinian culture can be expressed as a general symbol for joy and happiness. And like I mentioned, in Islam, martyrdom guarantees you a ticket to heaven. So they're saying that they're symbolically putting henna on his hand because he's going to heaven. It's not literal. They don't actually put henna on his hand because that wouldn't be allowed in Islam. It's more of an expression that this is just a joyous moment. And then the lyrics about the fabric wrapped around the waist, here they're referencing the Muslim tradition of burying the dead in a white fabric. And that's the fabric that they're referencing in this part of the song. Now, as much as these people shouldn't have to be going through all of this to be so positive, it's still extremely humbling to see just how much faith these people have in Allah despite what they've gone through. And it's really
Oh, thanks, Abir. So Subhi, I think is a great person to follow. A disclaimer is that he is clearly a Muslim and he's like a devout Muslim. So he's Palestinian Muslim. So he ties in a lot of like Palestinian culture to like Muslim traditions and vice versa. So I think he's a great person to follow because he's one of the few people that I've seen that really like hold on to this tradition and are like actively trying to memorize it. And take it on to hopefully the next generation. There's a couple of videos where you see him actually performing this at his cousin's wedding, which is really nice. But also the other thing that I think is worth noting is that these things not only, like he said, are used in terms of sadness or happiness, but they're also used to convey deeper messages. So For example, when a Palestinian was put in prison, they couldn't send out letters in a clear way or messages in a clear way. They would actually sing. So he did once a video and I couldn't find it, but basically he was saying that they like he would sit on the cell, and at the time like you could hear people from outside. So basically you'd be sending out this message that we're doing okay, depending on the lyrics of the song I guess the song that they're singing. So there's a lot of meaning to it. Unfortunately, it is a dying tradition because a lot of people, especially in the diaspora where you don't have a mastery of the language, a lot of people are spending the time to learn it. And a lot of times, like I said, it was more of like a generational thing where you pass people down, like the older generation would pass it down to the younger generation. And just because of the fact that there's, a change of how weddings are done and a lot more people in the diaspora, it's more difficult to keep this tradition alive. But I personally, this is one of my favorite traditions because again, it's very like communal and it's very deep, like in what they're saying. I also do want to give one disclaimer that there is something called a sahja, which is typically male dominated. It's the same idea where it's like the older generation of men are saying something while the younger generation of men are answering them or repeating the same thing. And it's typically also done in weddings, and it's more like a slower sing song rather than a faster, kind of a little bit faster beat that as you saw with this one. So I hope that makes sense. If anyone has any questions, let us know. But if you've ever been to a Palestinian wedding, this is usually how they actually open the Palestinian wedding. When they get the bride or the groom from either of their houses, they start with songs like this. That's why they call it like the Zepha songs, because they're usually associated with Zephas now, especially in Palestinian American weddings. Before they start any dancing or formal activities, they'll also start with this to kind of just have that, traditional flair to the wedding. So I hope that makes sense.
Thanks, Rania. That was really helpful. Does anyone have any questions or comments, thoughts about this, or just in general, the Palestinian weddings, what we've talked about so far? Okay. So another thing that you will potentially see if you go to a Palestinian wedding or a henna, which is the night before the wedding that Subhaita was talking about, are thobs or tatriz, which is what we saw in the Miss Universe video that was being appropriated. And so we want to show you the actual historical significance to kind of put into better perspective why what they did was so frustrating and so wrong.
The relationship of people with their heritage is at the heart of the first satellite exhibition from the newly opened Palestine Museum. It's called At the Seams, a political history of Palestinian embroidery, and it takes an intimate look at how the needle and thread played a role in the preservation of Palestinian identity.
What is a thobe? A traditional Palestinian dress, full robes, necklines, and winged sleeves, colorful embroidery on the chest, arm, or hem areas. These pieces are all part of the At the Seams, a political history of Palestinian embroidery. It's the first satellite exhibition of the Palestinian Museum that opened earlier this month in Ramallah. But just as the Palestinian people travel, these dresses are being showcased outside of the occupied territories in Beirut, where the biggest concentration of Palestinian refugees in the region live. The exhibition tells the story of exile and resistance.
Palestinian embroidery, for me, can be considered implicitly political by virtue of being made by people and worn on the body. It has a particular kind of intimacy, but it has also intersected in fascinating and sometimes unexpected ways big picture political events of the last 100 years.
After the Nakba of 1948, Palestinians were displaced and embroidery became a symbol of Palestinian heritage and endurance. Although every region has its own different patterns, the way needle and thread are used has remained the same. The museum's team of curators visit women from all over Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan to discover how much more there is to their embroidery than meets the eye.
The most important thing for me is that we understand this material not just as simply beautiful or decorative, but rather something that can tell us about Palestinian history, about Palestinian endurance and longevity, not just in the past, but also very much in the present and in the future.
This is why the exhibition is not limited to these displays at the Nimr Museum. The Palestinian Museum has also digitally documented the lives of women who continue to embroider in Palestine and beyond.
أنا جوزي كان يطرز معي بس أكون مضغوطة كثير بالشغل مثلا بقوم بدي أعمل له أكل ولا شيء بيمسكها للشقفة وبكفي لي هو يعني كان يطرز معي وكل ما هو قاعد بالبيت كمان يساعدني فيها.
Their insistence on their heritage is at the heart of the exhibition.
ومن خلال التراث كمان بنحيي ذكرى.
Through heritage, we revive our country's memory, and I think the heritage empowers us and pushes us forward so we help our children and men.
كمان بنعول أنفسنا فيه يعني إنه مش بس.
Women like Krayem are also passing the tradition on to the next generations, with training centers in several Palestinian refugee camps.
We resist by preserving embroidery, but to preserve it, you have to teach it and spread it among people. That's why I'm giving lessons, to ensure the women are able to do embroidery and know the names of Palestinian stitches.
At the Seams continues to shed light on the lives of these women and communities and their relationship with history. Through the story of needle and thread, this exhibition is weaving the narrative of Palestinians across the region back together.
Okay. Any thoughts about thobes or tatreez? If you've seen or been around people who wear them, do you ever think of them in this political context also? So, and not only is it something that is being appropriated and stolen, like we saw in the video, it's also it's more of like, I guess we could say like a dying art too, where not a lot of, I mean, it takes a lot of work, obviously, and it's very difficult, where not a lot of people know. So tatreez is like the actual embroidery and the thobe is the actual dress. So it's not something that that is, as done as much, but it is something you can learn if you're in the local area. PAC teaches a tatreez class, or if you want to take some virtual classes, there's a platform, a person who called Tatreez and Tea is what the name of her platform, and you can also follow her, and she provides classes. Rania?
Yeah, so just to add on to that, I think it goes back to the collective nature, which I think like is a constant theme that you can see through all of Palestinian culture, is that really collectivism, groups, families, intergenerational is a real theme with this. Because even with tatreez, something that's noted, and they talked in the video, and Nabeel briefly mentioned it, is like every area in Palestine has a specific type of tatreez. So people would know where you're from based on the tatreez you have. And not only that, but it's like I said, a communal thing in the sense, like, for example, if someone's not married, there's a certain thobe. If there's someone married, there's a certain thobe. If someone's of a certain socioeconomic value, there was a certain thobe. So like each thing of the thobe spoke so many more volumes than we see today, because today it's it's not I guess it's not as used in the traditional manner than it was in the past. But that's something to be noted of. And I don't know if Habib mentioned this or not, but we also have the reality of like when in the Intifada, when the flag was banned, the flag was banned, they put in the thobe they put the flag in the thobe itself, so that, and then that became the Intifada thobe. So it was like also a statement. So it wasn't only like for traditional or cultural values, it was like they can't strip us naked, right? We're gonna wear that flag no matter what. And that's where the beautiful Intifada thobe that was shown in the video comes from. So it's really this idea that we're challenging, we're challenging what's seen today in the sense of like, oh, it's just cross stitching, it's a pretty dress, but it really has so much meaning that has a lot to do with community and the collective.
Yeah, thank you, Rania. And yeah, thank you I forgot to mention that. And I think that's an example of how, because Palestinians do not have the same amount of resources or as many resources to fight against the occupation, they turn to things that they already have and that their cultural practices as political expressions of what they feel. And so like I think it's amazing and inspiring that women at the time of the Intifada, which you'll learn what that is, but it was the Palestinian uprising, when the flag itself was banned, we're like, that's fine, then we're just gonna like stitch it in our clothes. And so there's like so many little acts of resistance that are a part of Palestinian culture. It's very inspiring. Beckett, I don't know, is your hand up or was that still up from last time? I want to make sure I'm not.
Might have been from last time.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments or questions about the pho or tatfiz? Okay, so we have one more thing that we want to highlight and share with you guys. Can any of you guess what is the one big part of Palestinian culture we haven't touched on yet? Let's see if you guys can guess it. I'm sure there are a lot, but we'll see if someone can guess this one.
I mean, is it the flag and where it comes from? Like the history behind it?
That is important, but not yet. That one's going to be when we're talking about symbols and symbols of Palestine, but that's a good guess. It's something specific that Palestinians do that we haven't touched on yet. It's a fun thing.
Dabke?
There it is. Beckett got it. So Dabke also, although it seems like it's just a dance, has a lot of political elements to it and has been used as part of resistance, and they're going to explain that.
الدبكة الفلسطينية مرتبطة ارتباط كامل وتام باللبسة، لأنه اللبسة كمان إلها جوها، توب فلسطيني، جمباز، الكوفية، اللفحة، الروزة، هي حصاد عادات وتقاليد أخذناه من الأجداد وإحنا بنعبر فيه عن يعني تمسكنا بأرضنا الفلسطينية. عشان هيك إحنا متمسكين، وبالنسبة لنا الدبكة الفلسطينية يعني هي مقاومة بنقاوم فيها أي شيء بطريقة فنية. بالنسبة للأزياء ما فيش يعني سيبيكي من شعرك يا نور، بدنا نعرف نصور. يلا
مش عمر معين للدبكة، بأي عمر؟
ولا في كمان مميزات، لأنه الدبكة للجميع، يعني احنا كمان بنشوف ناس مش فلسطينية ولا عرب بيدبكوا الدبكة الفلسطينية، وبدنا كل العالم تعرف الدبكة الفلسطينية عشان لما يعرفوا الدبكة الفلسطينية يعرفوا عن انه فلسطين محتلة ومسروق منها تراثها وهويتها. هذا اللي احنا يعني بدنا اياه يعرفوا الاجانب قبل العرب.
الدبكة الفلسطينية تعني لي هوية وتعني لي جمال وتعني لي قضية بحد ذاتها، لذلك احنا لا نسمح ولن نسمح لأحد انه يقدر يطمس تراثنا.
يا ظريف الطول وقفت اقول لك رايح على الغربي وبلادك احسن لك، خايف يا ظريف تروح وتتملك وتعاشر الغير وتنساني انا ويا حلال ويا مالي ويا حلال ويا مالي.
ظريف الطول يعني هي مش قصة خيالية، هي قصة حقيقية من الشباب الفلسطيني الثائر اللي كان يقاوم الاحتلال الإسرائيلي في أيام النكبة والنكسة، واستشهد في معركة من المعارك وما رجع مع الشباب لما رجعوا على الديار. فظريف الطول كلمات وهو شهيد وصارت تتردد من الأجداد لما وصلتنا إحنا.
يا ظريف الطول يا سن الضحوك يلي راضي في دانا لمك وابوك، يا ظريف الطول يوم الغرابوك شعر راسي شاب والدار انحنى.
يعني هذا يا جماعة البيت بيحكي عن الوجع الفلسطيني، بيحكي عن الهجرة، بيحكي عن النكسة، بروي وجع الغربة. أو ما بتروح في أي مكان لتلاقي فلسطيني مغترب عن بلده اللي سرقها الاحتلال الإسرائيلي. يلا صح. فكرة اللويح إنه يعطي حركة معينة، إنه يلا بدنا نغير، مثلا بلعب 1:30 قدام حركة بس بيكون يعني بيكون هو يعني مثلا خلينا على الحالة شوية هيك، هي مثلا ها بندبك قاعدين، هو بيطلع اللويح في النص هيك، بدي حركة مثلا بدي الحركة رقم 1، بكون متفقين الحركة رقم 1 بنلعبها، بغير الحركة مع الموسيقى.
أنا لما بدبك بحس بانتماء، بحس بجمال، بحس بالثورة الفلسطينية، بحس بكل شيء تعنيه كلمة فلسطين.
أكثر حاجة بحبها إن أكون على المسرح، إن أعطي فوعان للجمهور
صيحة
وصيحات، بنفرغ الطاقة السلبية كلها في الدبكة. عشان هيك في المسرح بتلاقينا ناس ثانيين هي صيحة واطلع وانزل، وبنحاول نروح لدائما للخرق بنسميه خرق الطاقة والخرق الموجود، لأنه إحنا بنحب النور، بنحب ننبسط، وبنحب نثبت للعالم غزة مش موت وقتل وطخ لا بنحب إحنا كمان الحياة، والدبكة بتمنحنا حياة رغم إنه إحنا موجودين في جزء من هاي الحياة. نور بسألني إيش المناسبات اللي بتروحوا عليها؟
أعراس، مهرجانات، حفلات، كل شيء.
إحنا لدرجة
بكل مكان بتلاقينا.
لدرجة افتتاح محل، شاب بده يفتح محل بتكون الدبكة موجودة، تخيلوا لوين؟ ما بالك المناسبة الكبيرة، اليوم الوطني، الاحتفال، العرس. ويلا قمت ندبك، زهقنا واحنا قاعدين، ندبك. يلا.
يا ظريفة الطول عرفت اقول لك رايح على الغربي وبلادك احسن لك، خايف يا ظريف تروحي وتتملك
Any thoughts about the Dupke video? Same question. Have you all thought of it as something political like this, or that could have political meaning?
I think that because it's like such a physical expression of our resistance, as opposed to everything else is, I think, much more symbolic. But, you know, from the stamping of the feet to like, and, you know, all the like actual like actions that you are able to see, you know, it's much more tangible, like what they're trying to say with their with the dance. So
Yeah, that's a good point actually, because it's something that you're physically doing. So it like you feel, for them, they're feeling a connection to the land. They're feeling like the pride that they're holding on to. Yeah. Thanks so much. Anyone else? Could also just be thoughts about the video. If you thought it was cool, if you thought a certain part that they were saying was interesting.
I mean, I guess I could see it turning into a political issue because, I mean, the guy who's doing the Dubka himself, I think he said it's a way where he could show his own revolution or the Palestinian revolution through, as Jamal mentioned, through his physical actions, something like that. And maybe the Israelis, just seeing Palestinians have fun and enjoying their culture, it could be a part of why they're trying to steal that culture or just make it die out.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you have a bully and this person, you know, a bully is trying to really harm someone, but this person isn't giving them that power and is still doing what they want and isn't letting them really hold that over them, then they're going to get mad and they're going to get annoyed. So Palestinians, like you said, exactly, like still having fun, still enjoying it, finding ways to hold on to their culture and bring in revolutionary aspects to it. So even the songs, the traditional Dafke songs, like the song that, you know, if you were reading the translation as she was singing, it's directly tied to the occupation. So unfortunately, the occupation has been present for so long that, as we've seen from today's kind of PowerPoint, it's become a part of every single part of Palestinian culture, but in a good way, in an empowering way, in a way that like we're going to take this back and not take it back, but we're going to take agency over this and we're going to show our political spirit and revolution through it. And again, I want to emphasize, because Palestinians don't necessarily have the same resources to physically fight back. Not that they don't, but it's not the same level that Israeli resources are. So they use their culture and their traditions to showcase that. And I think that's something that's really inspiring. Any comments on any of the videos that we saw? So that was the last one we had. What we wanted to just end with is a discussion. And I'm not going to share my screen. I'm just going to put the question in the chat. But after watching all of this, why do you think, and I think, you know, hopefully we all know the answer, why do you think holding on to Palestinian culture is so important? And what are some ways that we can do that? So just to get us started thinking about things we'll cover in the rest of the course. And I just put it in the chat. And we can repeat some of what I said. That's okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about why we inserted this in the very beginning, why we talk about culture, and what are some ways that you all think that maybe you can be a part of this. Maybe if we all go around and share one way that we can hold on to Palestinian identity and culture. It doesn't have to be anything profound, just one way. And I'll give everyone a minute, and then you either can put it in the chat or you can unmute and share it.
Well, I guess I could start us off. Maybe, I mean, it's important to hold onto your identity because that's what defines you as a person. A person without identity is not even human. Because I mean, what values do they live by? What cultures they live by, and whatnot. So I think it's important to learn identity because at one point we're gonna need to fight and it's like gain Palestine back. And if we gain it back without any identity, then is it really Palestine at that point? Is it really the land that we've been all working on and dreaming of? I guess one way you could hold on to your identity is just sit down with your grandparents, with your uncles, or people who have lived through the Nakba of 48, 67, and whatnot, and just like understand the bigger picture and understand like their own story, because every person from Palestine has their own unique story as they've been through different struggles and whatnot. So maybe one way you can hold on to the identity or strengthen your identity is to actually it's like listen and hear what they have to say and hear their experiences just to know like what you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's a beautiful first example is talking to people, especially elders, people around you, just asking people for their stories. I love that. And maybe documenting them if you can. Rania?
So I hope you all benefited from this class a lot. I think this is a great reason why we ended with this question is, at least with working at PAC, we hear this a lot, which is like, why are Palestinians so proud? Why are Palestinians always bringing up their identity? And I'm hoping that, you know, both Abir and I are both hoping that out of this, you realize that it's not just Palestinians being super obnoxious, but there's a real movement of trying to erase the Palestinian identity. And I think that this is really the key. So even with teaching our kids Dabka or teaching our kids Tatreez or teaching our kids any part of Palestinian culture, this is an active resistance against the occupation, against the Israel settler colonialist project, because that's their idea. They want us to forget. They want us not to practice to practice the Palestinian culture anymore, because then in the end, that's it. They can culture appropriate it. They can take it over and then just say, this is our culture all along. But as long as we have, you know, kids doing Dabka, and as long as we have kids learning Tatreez and learning all these different things, we can keep the Palestinian spirit alive. And inshallah, see a free Palestine where, bringing it back to the beginning, we can practice our culture again freely there and owning up to it fully.
Exactly. Thanks, Rania. That was a good way to conclude. So can everyone else go around and just tell us one way that you can try or will try to hold on to Palestinian culture? So Beckett already started this off. Does anyone else want to go? You can unmute or you can just put in the chat. Jamal?
I guess, you know, since we're all trying to contribute, you know, to this Palestinian identity and, you know, like, you know, the wholes, you know, some of the parts and all that sort of idea, I think it would then be important that, you know, the best way we, you know, we hold on to our Palestinian identity is by engaging in all those things that, you know, we heard about, like, you know, figuring out like how to do Tatreez and, you know, Dabka and all these sort of things, so that then, you know, despite, you know, the diaspora and how we're all kind of separated, we can then pass it on to, you know, future generations and stuff, and it doesn't get lost, you know, in 100 years. And then in 100 years, it just becomes that much harder to, you know, kind of maintain that Palestinian identity when, you know, who knows what Australia will, you know, keep on doing. So.
And hopefully in 100 years, we will have freed Palestine by then. But even if it's freed, like we've said, we need to make sure we hold on to these. And that's a great example, Jamal, is like we have to start with ourselves. We have to challenge ourselves to pick up more Palestinian practices and also let other people know about them too. So maybe just, I'm looking at time, just one more. If we can get one more person or example, perfect. Ghazi, go ahead.
I think one way we can preserve the culture is by connecting the community and, you know, not just learning about the culture, but also like acting on it, like doing Dabka and stuff, and all the Palestinians in the area, you know, learning and doing it together. And that just really keeps the culture alive.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for sharing that. And I think the community part is important because like we saw, community is a part of Palestinian culture. And doing something in our everyday practice. So a lot of times we'll see the community come together for like a protest or a vigil, or when there's like something big happening and then there's like nothing else going on for the rest of the year. So something like what Ghazi's saying is like a continual like community building, talking to our community about this, being prideful of this as a community is really important. Okay, so does anyone else want to share before I close this off? Okay, well, thank you all for a goat startup, but by educating yourself, learning folk songs, learning tafreez, how to cook, the stories behind the food, the stories behind all of it, so we can teach others. And that's exactly it. Literally just do everything we just showed in this PowerPoint. Obviously not all at once, not something that's overwhelming, but if you just start somewhere, then that's making a difference. And again, just documenting it. I think if you can write stuff down, write stuff in a journal, tell people about it, that's a really important part of it. And PAC offers a lot of these resources. We offer these classes, we offer Dabka classes, we offer cooking classes. So there is a resource for you to do that. Just reach out to us and we can make it happen. Shamal, did you have something to add?
Yeah, and I just also kind of wanted to quickly add, like, I actually meant to mention this earlier when we were talking about like the Miss Universe thing, but I don't know if you guys heard, but like a week ago, I came across this article where it was talking about how this like dean at like Harvard University, how he, like, there was a bunch of backlash and like criticism against him because he denied this like fellowship for some like other professor or something because he was anti-Israel. So I found that was like really surprising, but I think that kind of ties in here because, you know, like we have to keep on with these traditions if there's going to be, you know, people like this, and, you know, in the education system, and just, you know, in the American system in general, that are going to be promoting these, you know, ideas and, you know, actively trying to dismantle, you know, everything that we're trying to do in maintaining our culture, our traditions, all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important, and it's just kind of a good example of that.
Yeah, that's a great example. It's a very sad example. I saw that and I was very frustrated, but also not surprised, because unfortunately our education system is where this happens the most. So it's not the first and it's not the last. And we'll definitely talk about how we can talk about it in the rest of the course, how academia has been one of the biggest ways of silencing Palestinians and Palestinian voices. So thank you, Javad. Thank you all for a great class. I will post the record. I'm going to stop recording. I will post this. Why isn't it? I will post the recording and the PowerPoints on Google Classroom.